Commander Jackson Reeves was having what he liked to call a professionally terrible day, which was really saying something, considering his career had peaked 15 years ago when he accidentally prevented a war by spilling coffee on a treaty that everyone realized was garbage once they had to rewrite it. Since then, the Earth Defense Force had cleverly repositioned him as a diplomatic liaison, which was military speak for, "We need someone expendable at boring meetings." Right now, he was at the Galactic Council's quarterly trade summit, surrounded by 200 alien species, all of whom seemed personally offended by oxygen. Jackson sat in Earth's designated pod, a chrome bubble that smelled faintly of disinfectant, trying to figure out if the 8-hour debate about tariffs on crystallized methane was actually happening, or if he'd fallen asleep and this was a nightmare. Spoiler alert, it was real. The current speaker was Cragthor the Undefeated, and honestly, the name should have been Jackson's first clue that things were about to go sideways. Cragthor stood roughly 9 feet tall, built like a tank, had a baby with an angrier tank, with gray-scaled skin, bone ridges that could double as can openers, and the kind of shoulders that suggested he bench-pressed planets for cardio. His species, the Vrin, had made their name as the galaxy's premier conquerors before joining the Council, and Cragthor clearly missed the good old days of just taking whatever he wanted. "The humans," Cragthor bellowed, his voice like gravel in a blender, "are weak, pitiful creatures who offer nothing but empty words and even emptier promises. Your trade proposals insult my empire. Your very presence insults this council." Jackson should have been paying attention. He really should have. But his mind was wandering to whether the station cafeteria served anything resembling a sandwich. And if so, would it try to eat him first? "I challenge Earth's representative," Cragthor continued, slamming a fist the size of a watermelon onto his podium, "to trial by combat, as is my right under Article 47 of the Galactic Charter. Let your champion face me, and we shall see if humanity has any honor worth respecting." The chamber went silent. 200 species held their collective breath, which was actually pretty impressive given that 60 of them didn't technically breathe. The council arbiter, a floating jellyfish thing named Quill Mara, drifted toward Earth's pod. "Commander Reeves, you have been formally challenged. Do you accept, decline, or request a champion to fight in your stead?" Jackson, who had just registered that someone said his name, looked up from his tablet where he'd been browsing images of Earth cats. "Oh yeah, sure, sounds good." The silence somehow got more silent. Quilmara's tentacles quivered. "Commander, to be clear, you are accepting trial by combat with Cragthor the Undefeated?" "Yep," Jackson said, nodding agreeably, still not entirely clear on what was happening but figuring it couldn't be worse than 8 more hours of methane tariff discussion. Cragthor's laugh boomed through the chamber, like thunder with anger management issues. "Excellent. Humanity will learn the cost of weakness. I will enjoy crushing your pathetic bones, human." It was at this exact moment that Jackson's brain caught up with his mouth, and he realized he'd just agreed to fight an alien warlord in single combat. Well, he thought, at least it would be quick. The second the council session adjourned, Jackson was tackled by Pip, his assistant liaison officer, who despite being roughly the size of a beagle and covered in purple fur with approximately 14 eyes arranged in a way that suggested evolution had been drinking, somehow managed to convey the full spectrum of panic. "What did you do? What did you do? What did you do?" Pip squeaked, all 14 eyes blinking in unsynchronized horror. "Commander, you just agreed to let Cragthor the Undefeated murder you in front of the entire galaxy. Do you understand? Murder. You. Specifically." Jackson loosened his collar. "Okay, in my defense, I thought he was asking if I wanted to grab lunch." "How could you possibly think that?" "I wasn't listening, Pip. That's kind of my whole thing." Before Pip could vibrate into another dimension from stress, Thornwell arrived. Marcus Thornwell was Earth's legal advisor, a man so precisely organized that his hair looked like it was styled with a protractor. He carried a tablet the size of a small door and wore the expression of someone who'd seen this exact scenario in a nightmare, but hoped it wouldn't come true. "All right," Thornwell said, his voice clipped and efficient. "The good news is, you're not technically dead yet. The bad news is, Cragthor has a combat record of 473 victories and 0 defeats, and his species considers eating their opponents after winning to be a sign of respect." "That's the bad news," Jackson said weakly. "What's the worst news? The combat is scheduled for 72 hours from now. It will be broadcast to 3 trillion viewers across the galaxy, and Earth's entire trade network depends on you not humiliating our species." Jackson sat down heavily. Fantastic. Any good news hiding in there? Thornwell's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile but was definitely the legal advisor equivalent. Actually, yes. According to galactic combat law, specifically subsection 94.6, the challenged party, that's you, gets to choose the era of warfare that will define the combat's rules and equipment. Pip's eyes widened, several of them focusing in different directions. Wait, so Jackson can choose the technological level? Precisely, Thornwell said, scrolling through his tablet. Cragthor assumed modern combat, which would mean plasma weapons, energy shields, the works. But you could theoretically choose any era: Stone Age, Bronze Age, Industrial. Jackson's brain, which had been in full panic mode, suddenly clicked into a different gear. That gear was labeled stupid ideas that might actually work, and it had gotten him out of more bad situations than he cared to admit. What about medieval? He asked slowly. Thornwell blinked. I'm sorry, what? Medieval combat. Swords, shields, that whole knight situation. Can I pick that? Technically, yes. But Commander, Cragthor is 9 feet of pure muscle. He'll crush you with or without a sword. But here's the thing, Jackson said, standing up now, pacing. When you say medieval, what exactly does that mean? Like what's allowed? Thornwell scrolled through the legal text. Any technology or weaponry commonly used in warfare during Earth's medieval period, roughly 500 to 1500 AD. Melee weapons, ranged weapons, armor of that era. He paused. Why are you smiling? Because Cragthor is thinking swords and honor in close-quarters combat, Jackson said. But you know what else is medieval? Pip's eyes began to align in something approaching understanding. Oh no. Oh yes, Jackson grinned. Crossbows. Commander, Thornwell said carefully. You want to fight a 9-foot alien warlord with what is essentially a medieval sniper rifle? Not essentially. Actually. It's technically period accurate, right? Thornwell checked his tablet, then checked it again, then looked like he wanted to throw it out an airlock. It is technically within the legal parameters, yes. Then that's what I'm doing, Jackson said. File the paperwork. I'm choosing medieval-era combat, and I'm bringing a crossbow to a fistfight. Pip buried his face in his paws. This is either brilliant or the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Could be both, Jackson said cheerfully. That's what makes it fun. 72 hours suddenly felt like 72 minutes. Jackson's first stop after filing the combat parameters was, somewhat inexplicably, a Renaissance fair in rural Pennsylvania. Pip had insisted on coming along, partly to assist and partly because someone needed to document humanity's final embarrassing moments for the historical record. Explain to me again, Pip said, watching a man in a jester costume juggle turkey legs. Why we are at a festival for humans who pretend the past was more fun than it actually was. Because, Jackson said, weaving through crowds of people in chainmail and velvet. This is where the people who are weirdly obsessed with medieval accuracy hang out. And I need someone who is weirdly obsessed. They found him at a booth labeled Sir Reginald's Historically Accurate Armaments. Sir Reginald, whose name tag revealed he was actually named Doug, was a mechanical engineer who spent his weekends handcrafting medieval weapons with modern materials and precision manufacturing. So you want a crossbow, Doug said, stroking his extremely non-medieval beard. Not for hunting, not for target practice, for fighting an alien warlord on galactic television. Correct, Jackson said. Will this alien be wearing armor? Probably his own version of it, yeah. Doug's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Give me 48 hours. I'm going to build you something special. What Doug built was essentially a compound crossbow on steroids. Carbon fiber limbs, aircraft-grade aluminum frame, a draw weight that could punch through Kevlar, and a scope that would make a sniper jealous. It was medieval in concept, cutting-edge in execution, and absolutely legal according to Thornwell's 17-page brief on combat regulations. It's beautiful, Jackson said, hefting the weapon. It's a historical anachronism that would make purists weep, Doug said proudly. The bolts are titanium-tipped. You get 30 shots before the string needs replacing. And I threw in a laser sight because, technically, lasers existed in concept during the medieval period, if you count really aggressive thinking about light. Did they, though? Pip asked. Not my problem, Doug said, handing over a quiver. Go kill an alien for Earth! The next 48 hours were a blur of YouTube tutorials, practice sessions in an abandoned warehouse, and Pip having a continuous nervous breakdown. Jackson learned that crossbows were point-and-click simple in concept but required actual skill to use under pressure. He learned about bolt drop, wind resistance, and how his shoulder would hurt like hell after 20 practice shots. He also learned that he was, against all odds, not terrible at this. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Cragthor was training in his warship's combat chamber, surrounded by his honor guard and Jen's several confused military advisors. Medieval combat, his second-in-command grumbled. What does the human think this is? A joke. Let him have his games. Cragthor laughed, practicing strikes with a massive warhammer that looked like it could dent a starship. Medieval, modern, it matters not. I will break him regardless. Perhaps I will be merciful and make it quick. Should we research human medieval combat techniques? Another advisor suggested. Cragthor waved dismissively. They fought with primitive metals and weaker bodies. There is nothing to learn. I have fought in 300 systems. I have conquered 12 worlds. One soft human with his ancient toys will fall like all the others. His advisors nodded, convinced. Not one of them thought to search Earth's historical database for the term crossbow. Back on Earth, Jackson stood in the warehouse at 3 a.m, exhausted and sore, having just put 15 bolts into a target from 50 meters. Pip watched from a safe distance. Several eyes closed in what might have been sleep or prayer. You know the galaxy is betting 1,000,000 to 1 against you, right? Pip called out. Yep, Jackson said, loading another bolt. And you know that even if you win, there will be 17 different species filing legal complaints about your interpretation of medieval combat? Yep. And you know that Cragthor could still just, run at you really fast and rip you apart? Jackson lowered the crossbow and turned to his assistant. Pip, I'm going to tell you something my drill sergeant told me 20 years ago. When you're outmatched, outgunned, and out of options, you have exactly one advantage. What's that? Nobody expects you to do something really, really stupid. He raised the crossbow again. Now, get some sleep. We've got an alien warlord to confuse the hell out of. Pip sighed, all 14 eyes blinking in resigned acceptance. I'm updating my resume after this. That's the spirit, Jackson said, and fired. The combat arena on Neutral Station Epsilon 9 was designed to accommodate exactly this kind of sanctioned violence. A circular platform roughly the size of a football field, surrounded by transparent energy barriers that could withstand a nuclear blast, floating in the center of an amphitheater that currently held representatives from every major species in the galaxy. Holographic displays projected the arena to 3 trillion viewers across hundreds of worlds. The betting pools had reached numbers that required scientific notation. Jackson stood in the preparation chamber, which was essentially a glorified waiting room with weapons racks, and what he assumed was an alien version of a good luck shrine. He wore jeans, a dark gray hoodie, and boots with actual traction because someone on his prep team had at least one functional brain cell. The crossbow hung across his back, quiver at his hip, 30 titanium-tipped bolts that represented the difference between going home and going home in a bag. Last chance to forfeit, Pip said. All 14 eyes focused on Jackson with an intensity that suggested he was trying to memorize Jackson's face before it got rearranged. And miss my moment of either glory or spectacular failure? Jackson checked the crossbow's string tension for the dime. 40th time. Not a chance. Thornwell appeared, tablet in hand, looking like he'd aged 5 years in 3 days. The legal challenges have been dismissed. Cragthor's team tried to argue that compound materials violated the spirit of medieval combat, but the arbitrators ruled that craftsmanship improvements don't change the fundamental weapon classification. You're cleared. Fantastic, Jackson said, his stomach doing acrobatics. Any other good news? Medical team is standing by. Your life insurance has been flagged as high risk. And Earth's stock market is apparently having a nervous breakdown. Thornwell paused. Don't die, Commander. The paperwork would be astronomical. The chamber door opened with a hiss that sounded ominously final. Jackson walked into the arena, and the noise hit him like a physical wall. 3 trillion beings watching, and apparently most of them had opinions they felt the need to express at maximum volume. The lights were blinding, the air recycled and sterile, and somewhere in the distance, he could hear what sounded like an announcer warming up the crowd in a language that his translator rendered as enthusiastic gibberish. Then Cragthor entered from the opposite side, and Jackson's survival instincts started filing formal complaints. The Vrin Warlord had clearly interpreted medieval armor as whatever makes me look most terrifying while still technically following the rules. He wore plates of dark metal that seemed to absorb light, covering his chest, shoulders, and legs, with chainmail protecting the joints. His helmet had horns, because of course it did, and he carried a warhammer that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought regular hammers were for amateurs. The weapon was easily 6 feet long, with a head the size of a microwave, covered in blunt, striking surfaces that would turn anything they hit into paste. Cragthor saw Jackson and stopped. For a long moment, the Warlord just stared. Then he started laughing. It wasn't a polite chuckle. It was a deep, booming laugh that echoed through the arena, the kind of laugh that said, "I can't believe this is actually happening." Cragthor pointed at Jackson, at his hoodie and jeans, at the crossbow that probably looked like a child's toy from where the Warlord stood. "This is Earth's champion?" Cragthor bellowed to the crowd. "This soft creature with his wooden stick? I expected a warrior, not a comedy act." The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some species laughed along. Others watched silently, probably wondering if humanity had just committed accidental suicide on a galactic scale. Jackson said nothing. He simply walked to his starting position, 40 meters from Cragthor, and loaded a bolt. The action was smooth, practiced, the result of 48 hours of doing nothing else. The crossbow came up to his shoulder, and he sighted through the scope at Cragthor's center mass. The referee, a crystalline being that reflected light in nauseating patterns, floated to the center of the arena. Combat parameters have been verified. Medieval-era weapons and armor. Victory by incapacitation, surrender, or death. Both parties have waived medical intervention until combat concludes. Its voice resonated directly in Jackson's skull, which was deeply unpleasant. "Combatants ready." Cragthor hefted his warhammer and roared something that Jackson's translator helpfully rendered as, "I'm going to paint the arena with your internal fluids." "Ready," Jackson called back, his voice somehow steady despite his heart trying to escape through his ribcage. "Begin." Cragthor charged immediately, and Jackson discovered that 9 feet of alien muscle could move terrifyingly fast when motivated. The Warlord covered the distance between them like a freight train with anger issues, warhammer raised, clearly intending to end this in one strike. Jackson dove left, rolled, and came up on one knee. The crossbow swung up, and he fired. The bolt hit Cragthor's chestplate dead center and sparked off harmlessly, the titanium tip skittering across alien metal. The crowd made a collective sound somewhere between a gasp and a laugh. "You will need to do better than that, human," Cragthor bellowed, pivoting with surprising grace for someone his size. Jackson was already moving, sprinting perpendicular to Cragthor's charge, creating distance. The arena was large enough that he could use space as a weapon, and he intended to use every meter of it. He reloaded on the run, muscle memory from countless practice shots taking over. Cragthor charged again, and this time, Jackson noticed something crucial. The armor was comprehensive, but it had to allow movement. Joints, connection points, places where the plates met. Those were opportunities. He fired again, this time aiming for Cragthor's left knee joint. The bolt flew true, but Cragthor shifted at the last second, and it glanced off his leg armor. The Warlord was learning, adjusting his guard, protecting potential weak points. "Stand and fight, coward," Cragthor roared. "Pass," Jackson muttered, circling again. The pattern continued. Cragthor would charge, Jackson would evade, create distance, fire, and adjust. 3 shots, 4, 5. Each one forced Cragthor to react, to defend, to waste energy on protection rather than offense. The Warlord was strong, but the arena was large, and armor was heavy, and Jackson could see the slight slowdown in Cragthor's movements. The crowd was no longer laughing. They were watching in something approaching fascination as the human refused to play by expected rules. This wasn't honor combat. This wasn't glorious battle. This was a persistence hunt, human style, using range and endurance against strength. On the 8th shot, Jackson saw his opening. Cragthor raised the warhammer for an overhead strike, and his right shoulder joint shifted, the armor plates separating by centimeters to allow the movement. Jackson didn't think. He aimed, and fired in one smooth motion. The bolt caught Cragthor directly in the exposed shoulder joint. The Warlord's roar shook the arena. Not anger this time. Pain. Real, genuine pain. The warhammer dropped from his right hand, and Cragthor staggered back, his left hand going to the bolt protruding from his shoulder. Jackson reloaded, breathing hard, sweat dripping down his face. He kept the crossbow aimed at Cragthor but didn't fire. The Warlord was injured but not defeated, and Jackson's arms were shaking from adrenaline and exertion. For a long moment, neither of them moved. 3 trillion beings held their collective breath. Then Cragthor did something Jackson absolutely did not expect. The Warlord started laughing again. But this time, it wasn't mockery. It was the kind of laugh that came from genuine surprise, from respect, from the realization that he'd completely misjudged his opponent. "You clever little mammal," Cragthor said, pulling the bolt from his shoulder with his left hand and tossing it aside. Blue blood oozed from the wound. "You actually hurt me." Cragthor stood there, blue blood dripping from his shoulder, and his expression behind the helmet's visor shifted from rage to something Jackson couldn't quite identify. The Warlord reached up with his left hand and removed his helmet, tossing it aside with a clang that echoed through the suddenly silent arena. Without the helmet, Cragthor's face was visible, all sharp angles and bone ridges, with eyes that glowed a dull amber, and he was grinning. Actually, genuinely grinning. 473 battles, Cragthor said, his voice carrying across the arena without needing to shout. 473 opponents. Warriors, champions, hunters, killers. Every single one of them tried to match my strength with their own. Every single one believed they could overpower me through superior force or skill or ferocity. He took a step forward, and Jackson raised the crossbow, his finger on the trigger. Cragthor stopped, raising his good hand in a gesture that the translator interpreted as peaceful intent. Not one of them, Cragthor continued, thought to simply not play my game. Not one of them had the intelligence to turn my own traditions against me. Not one of them made me feel like I had actually fought someone worth fighting. Jackson's arms were screaming from holding the crossbow steady. His heart was attempting to break the land speed record, and his brain was trying to process what was happening. "So, what exactly are you saying here?" Cragthor laughed again, the sound warmer this time. "I am saying, Commander Jackson Reeves of Earth, that you have given me something I have not experienced in decades. A genuine challenge. A true test, not of strength, but of cleverness." He gestured to his wounded shoulder. "You saw my weakness in moments. You adapted your strategy. You refused to fight on my terms and forced me to fight on yours. This is the mark of a true warrior, not the weapon they carry." "That's great," Jackson said carefully, crossbow still aimed. "But you're still coming at me, right? Because I've got 22 bolts left, and I will absolutely use them." "I offer you a choice," Cragthor said, and the entire galaxy seemed to lean forward to hear what came next. "We can continue this combat to its conclusion. You have wounded me, but I am far from defeated. I can still fight. Still crush you if I can reach you. The outcome is uncertain, which is itself a rare gift you have given me. Or, Jackson prompted. Or. We call this combat a draw. We acknowledge that we have both proven our worth. You, your cunning and skill. Me, my ability to recognize when I have been outmaneuvered. And instead of enemies, we become allies." Cragthor's grin widened. "My empire has been seeking true partners, not conquered vassals. Earth has shown me something today. Your species thinks differently, fights differently, wins differently. That is valuable." The crowd erupted. Half of them were cheering. The other half were apparently filing complaints in real time. And somewhere in the chaos, Jackson could hear what sounded like several betting pools spontaneously combusting. Jackson lowered the crossbow slightly. Not entirely, but enough to show he was listening. "And if I say no? If I want to keep fighting?" "Then we fight," Cragthor said simply. "And may the best warrior win. But I think, Commander, that you are smart enough to recognize a victory when it is offered to you." Jackson's mind raced. Pip was probably having a complete meltdown in the viewing section. Thornwell was likely already drafting the legal implications. Earth's diplomats were either celebrating or panicking, possibly both simultaneously. And here he was, exhausted, outmatched in close combat, with an alien warlord offering him the one thing he absolutely had not expected: respect and alliance. He thought about trying to finish the fight, thought about whether he could actually take down Cragthor before the warlord closed the distance, thought about the fact that his back was already screaming at him, and he was pretty sure he'd pulled something in his shoulder during that third dodge roll. "You know what?" Jackson said, lowering the crossbow completely. "Draw sounds fantastic. I think I pulled something in my back during all that diving around, and honestly, I could really use a sandwich." Cragthor's laugh boomed through the arena, joyous and genuine. The warlord strode forward, closing the distance, and extended his good hand. "Jackson, keeping one eye on the massive alien, reached out and shook it. Cragthor's hand engulfed his own, but the grip was controlled, respectful. "You have earned the friendship of the Vrin Empire, Commander, and my personal respect, which is considerably harder to obtain. Does this mean you're not going to eat me?" Jackson asked. "Because I heard that was a thing you guys do. Only to enemies," Cragthor said, clapping Jackson on the shoulder with enough force to nearly buckle his knees. "Allies, we take out for drinks." The referee floated back to center arena, its crystalline form pulsing with colors that suggested it was just as confused as everyone else. By mutual agreement, combat is concluded as a draw. Both parties recognized as honorable. All treaties and negotiations to proceed under. Whatever just happened here? The crowd's reaction was pandemonium. Some species were celebrating humanity's audacity. Others were demanding recounts and legal reviews. The betting pools were in complete chaos, with several major bookmakers apparently just giving up and declaring bankruptcy. Earth's section of the viewing area erupted in cheers that could probably be heard back on the home planet. Jackson and Cragthor stood together in the center of the arena, the human with his medieval weapon of technically accurate engineering, the alien warlord with blue blood still dripping from his shoulder, and neither of them entirely sure what had just happened, but both reasonably certain they'd just changed galactic politics in a very weird way. "So," Jackson said, unloading his crossbow and slinging it over his back. "About those trade negotiations?" Cragthor grinned, all teeth and terrifying goodwill. "I believe Earth's terms just became significantly more favorable. The aftermath of what the galactic media had started calling the Crossbow incident was somehow more chaotic than the actual combat." Jackson sat in the station's medical bay, where a very confused Vrin field medic was treating both his strained back and Cragthor's shoulder wound in the same room. The Warlord had insisted on it, claiming that warriors should recover together, which was apparently a Vrin tradition that Jackson was now part of, whether he liked it or not. "The bolt pierced cleanly," the medic chittered, its 6 arms working simultaneously on Cragthor's shoulder. "No major arteries severed. You are fortunate, Warlord." "Fortunate?" Cragthor laughed, wincing slightly as the medic applied what looked like glowing paste to the wound. "I am blessed. A genuine injury in honorable combat. Do you know how rare this has become?" He turned to Jackson. "You must show me this weapon's construction." "My engineers will be fascinated." "Sure," Jackson said, accepting an ice pack from another medic for his back. "Right after someone explains to me what just happened to my career." As if summoned by the question, Thornwell burst through the medical bay doors, tablet clutched in both hands, his precisely styled hair now somewhat less precise. "Commander Reeves, I have 17 priority messages from Earth, 43 legal challenges from various council members, 6 interview requests from major galactic media outlets, and 1 very angry message from your insurance company." "Which one should I be worried about?" Jackson asked. "All of them. None of them. I honestly don't know anymore." Thornwell collapsed into a chair that wasn't designed for humans and nearly fell over. "The council is in emergency session. Half of them are arguing that your interpretation of medieval combat violated the spirit of the rules. The other half is pointing out that you followed the letter of the law perfectly, and the Vrin Empire is now threatening anyone who tries to invalidate the outcome." Cragthor nodded approvingly. "My legal counsel is quite aggressive. I enjoy watching them work." Pip scurried into the medical bay, all 14 eyes wide and several of them twitching. "Commander, you're alive, and you're not even mostly dead. This is the best possible outcome I didn't think was possible." "Thanks for the vote of confidence, Pip." "Earth's diplomatic corps is losing their collective minds," Pip continued, climbing onto a medical table to be at eye level. "The trade negotiations that were going nowhere for 6 months, Cragthor's empire just agreed to all of Earth's major terms, and offered 3 additional concessions." 4 concessions, Cragthor corrected. "I am also providing security guarantees for Earth's colony worlds. Any species that threatens humanity will answer to the Vrin. It is only fitting, as you are now under our protection as valued allies." Jackson blinked. "Wait, when did that happen?" "When you defeated me in honorable combat while I was too arrogant to see your strategy," Cragthor said simply. "My species respects strength, yes, but we respect intelligence and cunning even more. You demonstrated both. Therefore, alliance is logical." Thornwell was typing frantically on his tablet. "The economic implications alone are staggering. Earth's trading position just improved by approximately 4,000%. Our stock market has recovered from its nervous breakdown, and is now having what analysts are calling a euphoric episode. 3 major corporations want to hire you as a consultant, and someone started a religion about you in the Andromeda sector. They what? It's a very small religion, Pip offered helpfully. Only about 40,000 members. They believe you're a prophet of creative problem solving. I'm not a prophet. I'm a guy who brought a crossbow to a fist fight. That's literally what their scripture says, Pip said. Before Jackson could process that particular nightmare, the medical bay doors opened again, and a delegation of council members entered, led by Quilmara, the floating jellyfish arbiter. The crystalline referee from the arena floated behind them, still pulsing with what Jackson had learned to recognize as confusion. Commander Reeves, Quilmara said, its tentacles forming what the translator interpreted as a formal diplomatic posture. The council has concluded its emergency session. Your combat has been ruled valid under all applicable regulations. The alliance between Earth and the Vrin Empire is officially recognized. That's great, Jackson said carefully. So nobody's mad? Oh, many. Species are extremely mad, Quilmara continued. The Zorfian Collective has filed a formal complaint claiming you violated the spirit of honorable combat. The Krendathi Union is demanding a rematch with different rules. And the betting syndicate of Deneb 7 has put a bounty on your head because you cost them 17 billion credits. Jackson sat up straighter. I'm sorry, a bounty? A ceremonial bounty, Quilmara clarified. They want to buy you drinks and then push you into a pool. It's how they express financial frustration. Galactic politics are weird, Jackson muttered. However, Quilmara continued, the council has also voted to offer you a formal position. We wish to appoint you as Special Combat Diplomat, responsible for representing Earth in future trial by combat scenarios and similar conflict resolution situations. Jackson stared. You want me to keep doing this? Your success rate is currently 100%, Thornwell noted, looking up from his tablet. And the job comes with a substantial pay increase, full diplomatic immunity, and access to the Council's restricted database of combat regulations across all member species. In other words, Pip translated, they want you to keep finding loopholes and exploiting them creatively so they don't have to deal with actual wars. Essentially correct, Quilmara agreed. Cragthor clapped Jackson on the shoulder again, gentler this time. Accept the position, my friend. You have a gift for turning dangerous situations into advantageous ones. The galaxy needs more of this thinking and less of the traditional hit each other until someone stops moving approach. Jackson looked around the medical bay, at Thornwell, who was already drafting contract terms, at Pip, who was vibrating with what might have been excitement or residual panic, at Cragthor, who had somehow gone from trying to kill him to becoming his biggest supporter in the span of an hour, at the council delegation, who were apparently serious about this insane job offer. He thought about his old career, the coffee incident, the years of boring diplomatic meetings where nothing happened. He thought about the last 72 hours, the terror and the improvisation and the moment when he'd realized that thinking differently might actually work. Okay, Jackson said finally. I'll take the job, but I have conditions. Name them, Quilmara said. First, Pip is my permanent assistant, with full diplomatic credentials and a pay raise. Second, I get final say on what constitutes acceptable risk. Third, Earth provides me with a proper research team to analyze combat law and find these loopholes before I need them. And fourth, he looked at Cragthor. The Vrin Empire provides combat training for Earth's diplomatic security forces. If I'm going to keep doing this, I want backup who knows what they're doing. Cragthor's grin was absolutely predatory. Agreed. I will personally oversee the training. It will be glorious. Council accepts these terms, Quilmara said. Welcome to your new position, Special Combat Diplomat Reeves. 6 hours later, Jackson stood in his temporary quarters on Epsilon 9, staring out the viewport at the stars. Pip sat on the desk, watching him with several eyes while the rest appeared to be sleeping. So, Pip said quietly, Special Combat Diplomat, that's actually happening. Apparently, Jackson said. You okay with being stuck with me? Stuck with you? Pip's eyes all focused on Jackson simultaneously. Commander, you just turned Earth's worst diplomatic disaster in decades into our greatest alliance. You made an enemy into a friend. You completely changed our species' standing in the galaxy by being too stubborn to die properly. I wouldn't want to be stuck with anyone else. Jackson smiled. Thanks, Pip. Also, your life insurance company is still very angry with you. Can't win them all. Down in the station's diplomatic quarter, news was spreading fast. Earth, the relatively new species, the ones who'd been struggling to be taken seriously, had just pulled off something remarkable. Not through superior technology or military might, but through creative thinking and the willingness to break expectations. Other species were taking notice, some with respect, some with concern, some with the beginning realization that humanity might be more dangerous than they'd thought, but in entirely unexpected ways. In a council bar, a group of alien diplomats watched footage of the combat on holographic displays. One of them, a reptilian species called the Scarix, shook its head in disbelief. The human brought a primitive projectile weapon to fight one of the galaxy's greatest warriors, it said. And it worked. Not just worked, another replied, a floating gas being from the Nebula Collective. It changed the entire political landscape. The Vrin Empire was unaligned. Now they're Earth's allies. That's not just clever, that's terrifying. Should we be worried? The Scarix asked. The gas being rippled, which its translator rendered as thoughtful consideration. I don't know. But I know one thing for certain. When dealing with humans, we can no longer assume they'll do the expected thing. So what do? We treat them with respect. We negotiate fairly. And we never, ever challenge them to combat without reading the fine print. Back in his quarters, Jackson received one final message on his datapad. It was from Cragthor, sent to his personal channel. My friend, it read, you asked in the arena if I would eat you. I told you only enemies are eaten. I should have mentioned. Allies, we fight beside. Welcome to the Vrin tradition of brotherhood. Next time someone threatens Earth, you will not face them alone. Also, my medical staff says I should avoid heavy lifting for 3 weeks. You shoot well, tiny human. Cragthor. Jackson laughed, saved the message, and looked back out at the stars. Somewhere out there, other species were. Probably plotting, planning, preparing for the day they'd have to deal with Earth and its strange habit of winning through creative rule exploitation. He turned to Pip. You know what the best part of this whole thing is? That you're alive? Well, yes, that. But also that nobody else knows what loophole I'm going to find next. He grinned. Including me. Pip groaned, several eyes rolling in different directions. I'm updating my resume anyway, just in case. That's what makes you such a good assistant, Jackson said. Outside, the galaxy continued spinning, slightly more wary of humanity than it had been a day ago. Earth had proven something important, something that would echo through galactic politics for years to come. They might not be the strongest species, or the oldest, or the most technologically advanced, but they were absolutely, without question, the ones who'd bring a crossbow to a fistfight and somehow make it work. And really, when you thought about it, that was the most human thing possible.